What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So, with spring practice right around the corner, now I was starting to look into what storylines and players I really want to focus on heading into spring, where we're going to get our first glimpses at what teams will be looking like heading into 2022. And personally, I am very interested in the Arkansas Razorbacks program as a whole next year, but specifically in KJ Jefferson, the returning quarterback for them. I also started to realize, though, I haven't really seen hardly anybody else covering him heading into next season, and that to me is shocking because I think he's one of the best returning quarterbacks in the SEC next season, and his ceiling is incredibly high, and I just don't feel like he gets really enough attention for how good he was and is likely going to be going forward. And so let's go ahead and dive into why I feel he's so underrated. So let's begin by looking at his stats from last season at Arkansas, which was his first full season as a starter, seeing real meaningful playing time. He threw for 2,676 yards, 21 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions on a 67.3% completion percentage. And in addition to that, he also ran for 664 yards and another 6 touchdowns. And it's important to remember that in college football, quarterback sacks count against the quarterback's rushing yardage totals, so that makes that 664 a lot more impressive, all things considered. Then you also need to factor in that he played in the SEC West, and so he was going up against teams like Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Georgia from the cross-divisional game. And then you're looking at an outstanding first season as a starter. Even when you compare him to a guy like Cam Newton, who had arguably the most dominant season in NCAA history at Auburn. His numbers don't look that bad. They're somewhat comparable. Cam threw for 2,854 yards and 30 touchdowns with 7 interceptions on a 66.1% completion percentage, while rushing for 1,473 yards and another 20 touchdowns on the ground. So obviously much better rushing production, slightly more prolific passing production as well on a slightly less efficient basis, but we're literally talking about arguably the best individual season in college football history with Cam Newton in that 2010 season at Auburn. Comparing that to KJ Jefferson's first year as a real starter in the SEC West, I'm not saying that he is Cam Newton's good. Nobody is Cam Newton. Cam Newton was a unicorn. You don't see those guys come through very often. But when you look at Jefferson's numbers side by side with him, they're really not that far off. And yet Jefferson seems to never get talked about, and it's I don't know, it's shocking to me considering how similar his numbers are to a guy like Cam Newton, who dominated college football in the SEC. Then if you look at their play style too, Cam and KJ are also very similar there. They have very similar builds. Cam's a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, slightly better raw athlete, but the styles are similar between them. They're big, powerful running quarterbacks who can run both inside the tackles and outside of the tackles. They have explosiveness in the run game. They also bring a very rare element of power to the run game that you don't tend to see from the quarterback spot in particular very often. And yet they also have elite level arm talent to be able to really stretch the defense vertically and still hit the easy stuff underneath pretty consistently. It makes for a very difficult quarterback to defend. And again, I'm not saying KJ Jefferson is as good as Cam, because he isn't. But what I'm saying is that his numbers are outstanding. And his ceiling, just from his raw physical ability and play style, is even better than his numbers are, and yet nobody seems to give him any attention. He has low interception numbers as well, with a high completion percentage, while also providing an outstanding run threat from the quarterback spot, and an offense that in a lot of games last year at Arkansas really desperately needed him to do everything. He managed to lead Arkansas to a top 10 ranking at one point last year that, while short-lived, helped put the program on the map after what they had been in recent years, and he really deserves more credit for that than he's getting, in my opinion. Now that we've got his numbers out of the way, though, let's talk about his ceiling, which I already have touched on. His stats show you already that at 6'3", 250 pounds, he can run the ball very well, but he still has room to grow there going forward. And if you've watched any of the Arkansas games from last season, you know he isn't afraid to take deep shots, especially when he had a guy like Treylon Burks out at wide receiver. It really helped him show off his incredible arm talent. And for a guy that is as strong of a runner as he is, it's rare to see those kind of guys be able to throw the deep ball as well as he can. Now, he definitely can still improve his downfield accuracy some, but he already has shown a talent for being able to take downfield shots and not cause turnovers with those. With his only 4 interception total, very low considering how aggressive the Arkansas offense was and how aggressive he was at throwing the ball downfield. Obviously, you have to credit some of that to Treylon Burks, but a lot of that goes to KJ Jefferson as well. Then you look at how he performed in the biggest games of the season, and you'll see that he was outstanding when he absolutely had to be. Look at the Alabama game, for example. Arkansas was extremely outmanned in that game, just purely on a talent and depth perspective, and yet he pushed Bama to the bitter end, finishing the game 22 of 30 for 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. That is outstanding quarterback play. In a game where he had to be brilliant for Arkansas to even have a chance. They still lost the game 42-35, but it was not his fault by any stretch of the imagination. He played outstanding. Then look again in the Ole Miss game this time. It's another game where he had to play near perfect for Arkansas to even have a chance to win. In that game, he goes 25 of 35, another 326-yard performance, 3 more touchdowns, and only 1 interception. Then you add into that, he ran for another 85 yards and another 3 touchdowns, and his team still lost 52-51. The man put up over 400 total yards of offense and 6 offensive touchdowns by himself against a 10-win team in Ole Miss that made a New Year's Six Bowl. Still lost. If that doesn't show just how high his ceiling was, then I don't know what will, because it's absurd that he put up that kind of production and lost against anybody, but particularly that he did that in a game of that magnitude against a team like Ole Miss. Obviously, yes, he still lost, but I mean, the dude scored 6 touchdowns by himself with over 400 total yards by himself. It goes to show that he really didn't get a lot of help last season, particularly from his defense, and a lot of pressure was put on him, and he delivered a lot of the time. Even against Texas A&M, which is a game where he kind of struggled to some extent, he only was 7 of 15 passing the ball, but he still threw for over 200 yards, threw for 2 touchdowns, had no turnovers, while running for another 50 yards as well in a close win for Arkansas that time. That was a game where he did get some help from his defense. And now critics will say that he struggled mightily against Georgia, but I mean, literally, who didn't do that? Every quarterback not named Bryce Young last season got annihilated by that defense, and KJ got no help from his offensive line. They had multiple false starts, no running game to help him out either. They got down big early. They were on the road in a very, very loud Athens. It was just a nightmare scenario for Arkansas. They had no business winning that game. No, he didn't rise and play above, his own team in that game as much as he did in, say, the Alabama game. But still, can you really fault him for that against a historic Georgia defense in his first year getting meaningful play time? I don't know. To me, I don't want to hold that against him too much. One game where I feel like you're nitpicking to take one little game like that. Let's also remember, like I said, first season getting meaningful playtime, and in the SEC West, no less. It's not like he started out in a nice little cupcake conference or a nice few easy games to get him through. Even his out-of-conference game was against Texas, who ended the year 5-7, but at the time was riding pretty high, had a lot of momentum going. Pretty sure they were favored in that game against Arkansas. Don't hold me to that. I don't remember exactly. And Arkansas absolutely destroyed Texas in that game, and he played outstanding there too. Regardless of what you feel about, the Georgia game and the Texas game and all that stuff, though, it's obvious to see that KJ has all of the physical tools to be an absolute game wrecker, and he's shown his ability to do that on multiple occasions last season with a pretty overmatched Arkansas team, right? If you give him another year to improve, because he has so much room to improve, it's actually crazy. I mean, he can vastly improve his decision-making. He can make much better underneath throws than he has. He has to be a little more consistent there. He can improve his running game a good bit as well. His pre-snap reads are another area where he has a lot of room to improve and grow as he just gets more adjusted to his offense. So he has room to get better. So you give him another year where he gets a lot better, right? His coaching staff, he gets a lot more used to them. You improve his roster heading into next season because it looks like the Arkansas roster has, and the sky is the absolute limit for him. Which brings me to my final point on why I think KJ is so underrated, and that's the talent around him. Not to say that he didn't have weapons last season, because he did, but honestly, beyond Treylon Burks, it was kind of KJ Jefferson or bust for Arkansas. The offense next season will have a lot more weapons to go around. They also have a great Burks replacement in Jaden Hazelwood. The biggest improvement, in my opinion, though, is not with who is going to be on the field with KJ Jefferson, but it's going to be with who's on his defense. They should improve a lot. Last season, the Arkansas defense played very hard, and they did their best, but they struggled mightily in a lot of big moments because they just didn't have the dudes to get it done a lot of the time. They gave up 52 points to Ole Miss, 42 points to Bama, 37 to Georgia, and most embarrassingly, in my opinion, 38 points to Auburn. Arkansas adds a ton of talent to their defense next season, particularly in the secondary through the transfer portal, which I talked about in my other Arkansas video on the channel, so be sure to go check that out if you want more details on the Arkansas team as a whole heading into next year. But the point is, I feel like the defense should be a much improved. There should be a lot better next season, and it should really open up the scheme and the play calling for them on the defensive side now that they have more talent, which will obviously improve even more. Then he will have at least an equal amount of help on offense as well as what he had last season. But honestly, I think they're going to be a little bit better on offense as well. You add all of that onto his own personal development, and I think KJ Jefferson could be a real monster in the SEC next season. Anyway, that'll do it for this video. Let me know down below in the comments section what you guys think about KJ Jefferson heading into next season. Am I crazy, or is he legitimately one of the most underrated players in the country next year? Also, if you made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave a like because it does help out the channel tremendously. And subscribe for more college football content in the future, as I will continue to upload very regularly going forward. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.